So we've got a Generac GP3250. Looking at it because the customer says that it hasn't been ran in a couple of years. I first went ahead and checked down in the fuel tank, and it looked to me like the thing was completely dry. So I looked down in both ways, back and forth there, and there wasn't anything in it whatsoever. I blew it out a little bit, and I put just enough fuel down in here to hopefully test the thing and get it started. So we use ethanol-free treated fuel for something like this, and any of these small engines, especially where fuel is going to sit for a long period, you definitely want to do that. So I've got it to the on position here. You can leave your breaker on or off, it's not going to matter to start it. I'm going to come over and hit it over to choke. Make sure your gas is on, which it is. It was off originally, but I went ahead and turned it on. So let's see what happens when we try to give this thing a pull. Well, it seemed like it tried to start. So if you're checking out your unit and it won't start, first thing you want to check is your fuel. Normally it's a fuel related issue. We've actually got some oil all up through the intake. So with something like that, it's probably gotten tipped up at some point and gotten oil all up through it. Before you start any engine, obviously check the oil. We already did, and there's no gas or anything in it. And the oil level is good. So oil level's good there. And if you don't check that, a lot of times what will happen is if the carburetor fails for any reason and leaks into your crankcase, leaks that gas down in there, and you try to start it, all that does is push everything up through the engine while it's trying to start. It'll start burning it off, and then you're pressurizing the crankcase real bad. So you can blow out head gasket, any of the other gaskets of the whole unit, crankcase gasket or valve cover gasket, either way. But you only need just a couple tools to test this. If your unit won't start, you can try putting some gas or some carburetor cleaner in the intake. See if it fires up on that. If it does, you know that it's not getting fuel. If it does not, you need to check your spark next. We already saw it kind of pop off. Give it a little more here. Yeah, so it's probably getting some bad fuel or something mixed up with it. It wants to start on the starting fluid. As long as you can get it to start there on the starting fluid, you know your problem is you're not getting fuel. If it doesn't start there, you need to come over, go ahead and check your spark. So the spark plug sits right up top. Sits right here, and you can go ahead and unplug the wire, and you can take out the plug and test it against the block, hold it against the block while you pull it, and see if you can see the spark. If you can, obviously you know it's good. Otherwise, they make inline spark testers. They also make clip-on spark testers. Kind of hard to come by anymore, but it'll tell you if your spark's good. So this one's good. So we know we've got a carburetor related issue here, and the reason we know that is because this tank was completely dry when it came in. There was nothing in that tank whatsoever. Whoever had it before probably let it run completely dry, but you still leave some fuel in the bottom of the tank when that happens. So we're going to pull the carburetor. And it's just two 10mm bolts to take off the front. So one there and one there to take off the front. And then there's one on the backhand side, right behind the air filter here. So and it comes straight out this way. So the only thing left on here is the EPA line coming from the top of the tank. So if we take it off, then we're completely free. So that just comes off the front. Then we're at a point where all we have is the gasket. That's just what fits to your air cleaner to seal it. Seals on both sides with just a rubber. So we can actually get to the carburetor, pull it out. Fuel line clamp just comes off the other side. It looks like it broke. We'll have to throw a new one on. It's leaking some gas. Definitely looks like just my fresh gas that I had put in there. So I've got it turned to the off position now. In this case, I'm not going to remove or clean this, but I will tell you that if you need, you know what, maybe I'll just do it. The petcock there takes a 9/16 to take it off. If you take this off, you just go ahead and loosen the nut up some. You go ahead and take it off. You can blow all down through here and blow out that screen that sits in your tank. So I'm gonna grab something to throw this up just a little bit. It's gonna make the generator sit up high enough. What little bit of fuel in there is pushed to the back. So, all right. So here a lot of times what'll happen is stuff will get all around there and all gummed up. Rust or anything like that builds up, and then your fuel flow can't keep up. So you want to blow all this out, and that's when you drain the fuel tank. So when you drain that fuel tank out, if it's real bad or anything like that, you can blow all down through here, dry the tank out by going up through the tank here and blowing back down through. A lot of times people will put a rag down in the tank while they're doing that. This filter just unscrews. They'll put a rag down in the tank while they're doing that just to absorb all the extra fuel. And you can blow down back through both ways. Try not to get it to go directly at your face like I just did there. That's not a good thing. But yeah, make sure that screen is completely cleaned out. Make sure that tank's completely dry and that you know the only thing in there is good fuel. So at the beginning, we kind of solved that problem, but you don't want to screw it back up in too far. If you go too high there, then the fuel pulls from a spot here in this reservoir that is higher than what the rest of the fuel tank is. So if that happens, then the water or anything builds up kind of down in the bottom and you'll run into issues. As you're tightening this up, you want to tighten it to the point where it's nice and snug against the top, but you don't want to over tighten it. If you do, it'll actually ruin the gasket right here in between the tank and the petcock. From there, you just take the carburetor off. So it's nice and easy. It just pulls straight back, and as you pull it back, you can grab the spring. Get a little bit better view on that part of it. Take and grab the spring at the back part. That's just your choke rod. It can come off at any time. The spring at the back, so you're pulling the whole carburetor, the spring at the back just comes up and out. And then the throttle linkage, it also, as you're pulling back, it just comes up, straight up and out also. So pretty easy to do that, and then your whole carburetor is free. There's nothing else attaching it. So we're gonna show you how to get this thing 100% back up and going. Just spilled some fuel out of the carburetor there. See what kind of fuel we got in it. It was interesting that the thing didn't want to run there a minute ago. We don't need that many tools to get this thing cleaned out. All you really need is honestly, a wire brush would work fine. If you pull a loom out, you can clean the whole thing just with that. But a lot of people like to use torch tip cleaners, or they like to use something like this. They do work well sometimes, but it depends on the condition of the carburetor. You'll also need a screwdriver, either something like this or something like a screwdriver like a normal utility one. A lot of times the flat part of that will work well. Something like this. Gives you a nice wide slot, and it allows you to get down in there in this main jet. So let's take it apart. I'll show you what I'm talking about. It's definitely got some yellow gas to it, a little bit yellower than what we were seeing. So our stuff is, I mean, it's just 100% clear. This is not. So it looks like there might be just some water down at the bottom a little bit. And there's just a couple tiny little chunks of something down there. So I wonder if some of these jets are just slightly clogged up or what's going on, but it definitely wasn't getting good fuel. Either what was down just in that bowl and maybe in the fuel line was real bad or something. So I just took the pin here of the needle or of the float out. So a lot of times what'll happen is this needle will get stuck in there. It won't move. So you're trying to take this float out and people will force it and break something. You don't want to do that. If that's getting stuck, you're going to want to grab just right on this, just right at the edge there, and you're just going to turn this needle like this. Once you turn it, as soon as it starts turning, it'll pull right out. So it is spring loaded. So spring on that. Oop. I was gonna say there was a spring on that, but no, it didn't fly off. So that spring to come on or off there, if you want to pull it on, just pushes up and through. So sits down in just like such, and it can come off really easily just like that. So we'll go ahead and take the main jet. This is where you need either this or a screwdriver that's not too wide. It needs to fit down in there into that nice brass jet down in there. Otherwise you'll strip it out. That brass is super soft. So all right, and you got to kind of push hard. I like to push in real hard as you're doing it and turn, because that brass, again, it's just super soft. If you get it to turn one time, a lot of times it just, so those both fell out easily. This will sometimes stay stuck up in here. If you look through, you should be able to see that down in the middle there now. So if you have an issue with this happening, what you can do is you can come and you can push it down from here. So you can push that down through the center, and you can use some carb cleaner to work up through, just spraying down here. And if it comes down just that little bit and won't come out still, you can kind of beat on it here, push it, and work it back and forth. That's the easiest way to get that jet out of there. You want to make sure that your inlet here is extremely clean. This one doesn't look too bad, but you can do that with some of these brushes like such. You can use a torch tip cleaner to get down in there. You can use pieces of a wire brush. A lot of times, as I said, I like to just pull a loom out, and I'll use that to clean everything out of the carburetor. That's all you would really need to clean any of it. So just that loom there, you can use it either way and just work it down through. So just to clean that brass all up, get it so there's nothing there. So there's nothing there that's going to stick your needle up as it goes in. There's a tiny little piece of something. I wonder if that was stuck in there originally or if it just got on there. So the pilot jet, it looks like it's got a cover over it. So for those, you've just got to either squeeze or pinch or something, but that cap just pops off. So you want it about a 1/4 inch past or somewhere right in there. And that just keeps your governor or your throttle plate from coming back too far. So it keeps the governor from overcorrecting, essentially. So we'll pull this out and get to this top pilot jet. Pilot jet pops out, just straight up and out. You want to make sure this jet down in here is clean. So that's one of the biggest jets you want to make sure is clean. Go ahead and use one of those tiny pieces of that loom that you just took apart. You're just going to poke right down through there. You should be able to see it in the center, and this one was partially clogged, so should be able to see that right down through the center as you're doing it. If it's not poking through for any reason, you've got an issue with your pilot jet. It's not going to run right. It's going to surge. So we've got this pretty well all the way torn out. If your bowl gasket starts coming out, go ahead and take it off. We're going to put ours in the ultrasonic cleaner at this point. Let it clean for about 10 minutes before we proceed. If you don't have an ultrasonic cleaner, which a lot of you probably won't, you can use carb cleaner. You can either let it A, soak in there for a while, or you can B, just kind of spray it out depending on how bad it is. So carburetor cleaner works well, and we'll do that after we get it in the cleaner to dry everything off and finish the cleaning. But the ultrasonic really just takes care of a lot of the problems right off the bat without really doing much. So put it in there for about 10 minutes. let anything that was wrong with it go ahead and get off. Minutes later here after the cleaner. Again, if you don't have an ultrasonic like that, which most of you won't, you can just skip to this step. You want to make sure all the holes down through the whole thing's been had some carb cleaner ran over it. That'll just get all the water off of it. Any of the other gunk that's sitting down in there. And make sure to pay close attention to the inlet. Make sure that that's blown out real good, both with compressed air and with gum out is best, but down in just around everywhere. So then what I like to do, I like to take either one of these or my torch tip cleaner. I like the large torch tip cleaner for this, seems to work well, and you go just around the outside. So you just work it up and down, and all you're trying to do there is you're trying to get any kind of gunk or any kind of buildup, varnish, green gum along there. You're wanting to get all that off of there. So usually takes a combination of things, something like this, some of your wire loom, but if there's any green down in there, you want to get all that out before you skip past this step. That's a very important area. So if you look at your needle next, you want to make sure along all four of these areas, especially the corners, that those are free of any debris or any varnish or gum of any sort, that your needle on the end here is a perfect triangle, that there's no issues with it, that it's just in great shape. If not, it's going to leak fuel. So put your spring back on there, and then you can go ahead and reinstall it. And again, just kind of putting the spring right there and pushing in, and it works its way right up in through, and it'll stay. So you want to get anything that's on here off also. Let's rinse it all off now. Okie doke. And then you can use air just to finish it. Usually I like to take this out before I even put it in the cleaner, just so it doesn't swell up. Sometimes it'll swell up real good. This one stayed a pretty good area. As long as you get it in the cleaner pretty quick after you pull it out, it doesn't swell up too bad. If you leave it out in the general air, for some reason it seems that it does swell up pretty quick. So here, that should just go in and out. Shouldn't be any hang up whatsoever. You can go ahead and test on the inlet if you have a vacuum pump. Otherwise, you can use like a suction with your mouth. Use your tongue or your cheek there. It should hold the suction to there, and then when you lift it up, it should let go of that suction. You want to clean your bowl out real good. Make sure there's nothing in the bottom that can chunk off. A lot of times there'll be varnish or something all around the outsides. It'll need to come off. In this case, this one's pretty clean. So, as far as your jets, this is basically the main jet or the emulsion tube that goes up through the unit, and the liquid sprays out through the sides, and it all draws up through into the carburetor to kind of give it that fine mist it needs to run. So all of these holes along this unit need to be free and clear. So what that means is that if they're not at all, you can use anything, wire brush or torch tip cleaner set or anything to poke those out, but you want to make sure when you're done that you can see light all the way through all of these. You should be able to see a light through each one of those holes on both sides as you're rotating it, everywhere that it should be. So as you're testing it, if you don't have a good light or anything like that, you can look. If you're spraying carb cleaner, should get a nice even spray. So shouldn't really be any obstruction anywhere when you're spraying down through there. So it goes down, it goes up to the carburetor, so it goes down if you're holding the carburetor upside down. And then you got your main jet. That's the most important part of the whole thing. You want to make sure this is completely clear, no obstructions on either side. There is a tiny little kind of cavity down in there where stuff sits. This thing looks, yeah, it looks real clean. I don't really see anything in it, so I don't know if there was maybe or whatever, but sure doesn't seem to be now. No. There it is. I was wondering where my smaller one went. Fell off of my set. Yeah, I mean, it's nice and clean. We're gonna go ahead and screw it back down in there. You don't want to over tighten this because you'll have one heck of a time getting it back out. if you ever have to reopen it. Make sure that that gasket is in there again. You can kind of rotate it like this, and it should feel solid all the way around as you're doing that. Make sure that your gasket sits down in there. Make sure there's nothing on the end of the bolt here that can, because that can also chunk off and block up that main jet pretty easily. So go ahead and tighten that down. This is the one we cleaned to begin with, made sure it was clear before we even put it in the cleaner. Just gonna blow it out. Make sure these O-rings are good, both on the top and the bottom. There's one up top here and there's one down at the bottom. If they're not, you'll get some leaking coming out of it, and a lot of times your unit will surge. So that went down in there pretty well. A lot of times if the gaskets aren't good, it'll hesitate going down, being pushed down there. We're gonna put this back in. We're not gonna worry about putting the cap back over it. That's just to keep people from adjusting, but we're gonna go right about where they were before. All right, so we're gonna hit it about stop at that point. I always like to replace the intake gasket every time you have this off, because if anything on that side of the carburetor leaks, you will have issues. So if you go ahead and do the intake gasket now, while we have it off, we usually like to use the Honda, it's a 16221 ZH8-801, just a regular old gasket, but they're very common across the board. They use pretty much the same gasket for these. There's, I don't know, probably 100 different styles of carburetors, but then you put your carb back on. You can put your choke back on the thing at this point too. I'm gonna leave it off just for a little better maybe lighting or something here. See if that helps at all. All right, so we're gonna grab the linkage and the spring up top. We're gonna first put the spring down through into the hole. It's just easier to do that way. And then you bring it around to the back, and you're pulling out the carburetor at this point. You're not putting it all the way in. It's still hanging way out front here. And then you're gonna push that linkage down in as you're pushing forward. So it should go down in there, and then you're good to go. So we've got just went ahead and replaced the, if it's got any cracks or anything real bad, you wanna go ahead and cut those off on the fuel line. I usually like to cut back about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch anyway, just to give you something fresh to start with. A lot of times that way you won't get those little chunks that fly off of that fuel line on the inside. Just saves you some trouble maybe down the road. So we can put our intake piece back in here, the choke piece. And we've got everything hooked up on that end, and then what we need to do is go ahead and put the cover and stuff back on. Air cleaner cover. All right. We can put the bolts now that go on the front back on. And then there's one that goes on the back side. It's the two 10mm ones that go on the front. And there's a 10mm one that goes on the back side. And then this goes in here. Let's see, I believe it goes just like so. Nope. Just like such. Huh. Drawing a blank here for some reason. Let's see. Okay, so that should sit on that side. That was the most interesting puzzle I've had all morning. Okay, so it goes just like that, and then got our air cleaner that goes in. You want to make sure that's free of anything. If there's anything on it currently, you can go ahead and blow that out. We can put our cover on. Wing nut. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn the fuel on. And then I'm going to hook my me go ahead and hook up the EPA line real quick. All right, and then we got the line here from your breather to go back to the air cleaner. Oop. Doesn't look like this guy wanted to go on there real well. There it goes. And then get that one on the back of the carburetor real quick. Okay, so now we got everything hooked up. I'm going to turn the fuel on. We're going to fire this thing on and fire this thing up and see what's going on. Choke. So this thing's now running good. When I first turned it on, I did see a little bit of fuel. Yeah, I'm seeing some fuel here out of the petcock. So we're gonna have to replace that. It comes as a petcock assembly. I think we actually have one. I'm gonna throw that on real quick. But that's how to get your carburetor back clean and get this thing back up and running if it's been sitting for a little while, if it's surging, if it's not running right, any of those things. That should get you back on the road. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.